G'day, Dave here, and thanks for joining with me again to look at Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes is a wonderful part of the Bible. It's a little different to most of the Bible. It's looking at life under the sun, and the author of this book, who had all kinds of resources at his disposal, is exploring so many different angles in life to try and find meaning and purpose. What he's looking for is something that will last, something that is able to be hung on to, something that will really make a difference for all eternity. And in chapter 4, and we're going to be looking at this now, he explores the topic of work. And work's a big issue in our lives, isn't it? Most of us spend some of our life working. Some of us spend most of our lives working. I think I got my first job when I was around about 12 years of age in a men's clothing store for a few weeks. Had various jobs through high school, milk runs, paper runs, that sort of thing. And I've had numerous different jobs through university, and over the last few years have focused on being a pastor. Many of us will have many jobs through our lifetime. Some people spend their whole life in one career. What is it that drives us? Why do we work? I guess there's a number of reasons, isn't there, why people work? Looking at survival is a basic reason to work. We work so as to get money, so as to be able to buy food, put clothes on our back, put a roof over our heads, have the basic fundamentals of life. Where I live, not too many people are working just for survival. There are other motivations. We want security. We want to be able to provide for ourselves long term. We perhaps want significance. We want our jobs to make a difference. We want to be having influence, power and authority through our work. Or maybe it's got to do with just doing something which is worthwhile, something that's satisfying, something that will kind of fulfill us and make us feel like we're living valuable lives. But the danger is, of course, that we can ask too much of our work. We can ask for our work to satisfy us, but it might be unsatisfying. We can ask it to give us security, but what happens when you lose your job? We can look to our work for significance, but then maybe people don't respect the work that we do. Well, the writer of Ecclesiastes explores this notion of work and the motivations for work, and we'll pick it up at chapter 4 and verse 4. He says in chapter 4, verse 4, "I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind." Now, the first perspective here is to say that toil and achievement come about because people want what others have. It's a pretty good analysis, isn't it? We want to keep up with the Joneses. Advertising feeds off this. It keeps telling us that our lives will be better off if we get that product, if we have this deal, if we invest in this place, if we have this kind of holiday or this kind of future locked in. And so much of our work is spent chasing after things, chasing after that which we think is going to make our lives meaningful. And the writer here says that so much of our work, so much of what we do spring from our envy of those around about us. And that is so true. But there is a response that's no better. And we see that in verse 5. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. And the temptation, I suppose, is to want to give up on the rat race, to see that work is a driven phenomena, that people are spending their whole lives, they're losing their health, they're losing their relationships, they're all tied up with the pursuit of things. And so for people to drop out, people to think, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to become a hippie and go and live out in the bush and I won't do anything. And it says, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. You need to work. Work is a fundamental experience because it's what puts food on the table, it's what puts clothes on the back, it's what puts a roof over our heads. Trouble is, we probably don't need all of that food or all those different clothes or a better roof over our heads, and that's where envy comes in. And so he says in verse 6, better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. The idea here, I think, seems to say that there is a middle ground. It's the wise way. And the middle ground has to do with tranquility. It's being at peace. And that is found when you know the secret of contentment. How do you find contentment? How do you escape the rat race? How do you escape this constant wanting to keep up with the Joneses? How do you escape the desire for stuff to make our lives worthwhile? Well, it's through contentment. I want to take you to another part of the Bible, to the book of Philippians in the New Testament. And the Apostle Paul's writing about having learned the secret of contentment. Hear what he has to say from Philippians chapter 4 and verse 12. He says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. See, the Apostle Paul, he's writing this from in prison. At the moment, he's constrained. He doesn't have access to so many things that he would have normally enjoyed in life. And he's dependent on people around about to support him, to provide for him for his needs in prison. And he's asking for help. But he says that he's not asking for help so much for his sake as to help other people to see his needs and to learn to be generous, because he has learnt how to be content. And he's learnt to be content whether or not he has things, whether or not he has an income, whether or not he's even free from prison, whether he's well-fed or hungry, whether he's living in plenty or in want. Because for Paul, contentment doesn't come through having a larger bank account. It doesn't come through having paid off the mortgage. It doesn't come through having a career that's fulfilling. For Paul, contentment comes through God giving him strength. For he needs to know, and he does know, that God will meet all of our needs according to the riches that are found in Christ Jesus. Look at what he has to say in verse 19. As he writes this letter, he says, My God will meet all of your needs according to the glorious riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. See, if we know that we have everything in Christ, that we have a relationship with God and we have an eternal, secure future, then we don't need to be chasing after things. We don't need to be making something of our lives. We can actually learn to be content. And that contentment comes from the power of God.